Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Borderless Podcast. This is James. I got two friends with me in the studio here, Sean and Mittie, and of course we got Jonathan Lockwood here.
Hey,
How you guys doing?
We're doing well, James.
Good, James. All right. Thanks for coming in. I'm doing very good. So basically, I've known them for a little while, like probably, I don't know, a year or something like that. I got to know you guys. And I saw this video that you guys put out, or I guess you didn't do it, but some other people did it on you, and it was about San Miguel and you traveling with the Land Rover and lots of really cool stuff. So I think that what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to put in a couple audio clips and to let you guys see that this is something that really goes along with the Borderless Podcast, so I'll just put that here.
We have been in Mexico for about 7 years now. We are into adventure travel. We use the Land Rover to get into all the tight spaces we can throughout Mexico, Central America, and hopefully in the future further south.
I think traveling with a partner, at least for me, is just the best experience. We have so much fun when we're together, build so many memories, and unlike possessions, memories are what you'll always have. Even the hard times, when you look back on them, they can be funny, they can be inspiring, they change over time. So I think even those experiences are valuable.
The Land Rover community is very much an adventurous community, be it in Iceland or Latin America or Asia. They're all over Africa too, of course, Europe. There are so many stories, so many overlanding stories. People are excited, they love that kind of stuff. So absolutely, they're an adventurous group. They're pretty tuned in to what we're doing right now. When I was in DC and working, I was at a place in my life where I was ready for a change. I had been in foreign policy for quite some time. I had a different concept of what was necessary, what was important, what I had to have, how much things should cost. But I realized that I actually needed to divest myself of those things, just get rid of all that stuff that I thought would be necessary in the future. The more I got rid of, the freer I felt, the more places I realized I could go. I just felt unburdened, unencumbered. Then crossing into Mexico, living here for a while, making the transition to freelance photography woke me up a little bit in terms of what I really needed to survive. And it was kind of shocking. In fact, for a lot of people, they just didn't know what I was going to do. Of course, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was always interested in Latin America, and I wanted to get closer to the action. I was feeling unfulfilled and just not quite alive enough. I always wanted to have the Land Rover, keep it with me, because I knew that it would enable me to do things that I was always going to want to do. I have to say that we're both pretty gung-ho about it. We're into hard travel, off the beaten path. We're doing it on the cheap, as inexpensively as possible. So I'm amazed at how well we deal with it, because we both know that we're there for that purpose and that we're going to have some hardship. If you're in that car for 10 hours and you get out, it's like you've been to a rock concert.
You get through those tough times and then you get to enjoy moments of incredible sunshine and beautiful views and access to places you couldn't get otherwise.
The benefits for traveling the way that we do have to do with the depth of travel. You can fly someplace and stay in a resort, but you're going to miss everything on the way, and you'll probably miss the real culture going on around.
I mean, when you have the opportunity to really get to know someone and see what their daily life looks like, that's a more authentic glimpse into that community.
You end up in places that are not intended for tourism. It's an eye-opening experience usually, especially in places like Latin America. They just live entirely differently from what you're used to. So if you can get into the nooks and crannies, you're going to get a much deeper experience and a much better understanding of the people and the places you've seen. I have seen parts of the world that I would never have seen. There's no place that I can't go that I would say, oh, but we can't go there. The further up the mountain and into the winding roads we can get, the better, because the better the content, really, the more unique, the more real an experience we're going to have.
We take risks, we push our boundaries, but you have the opportunity to really grow as a person, to become more compassionate, to become more patient, to learn more about the world around you. I think it gives you a lot of perspective.
The most rewarding thing about my lifestyle is probably the freedom and realizing that I could do it. It seemed daunting at the beginning. Am I just going to jump off this cliff? Am I going to go to Mexico, become a photographer? How's that going to work? Am I going to be able to feed myself? And is it going to be okay? And it wasn't that I was terribly upset. I wasn't. I was doing well, and looking around everybody else, I was in a good place. This is how it was to be done, but I wasn't living to the fullest. I had the weekends to play with in terms of getting out and seeing something different. That just isn't enough. That should be my life full time. And then if I need to do something to make more money, I can do some commercial work, but then I can come back to my projects. And making that change, taking the plunge, the initial step was the hardest, but it was extremely rewarding. Right out of the gate. First couple of years, touch and go, perhaps. But by year 3, I pretty much knew that this was doable. That opened up all kinds of doors for me. These trips, I come back excited with so much content that I get to edit. That is what I find exciting, exhilarating. Somebody feeling trapped in a 9-to-5 considering a lifestyle change, I would say do it. Absolutely do it. You don't need much. Save up a couple thousand and take the plunge. It seems like it would be terribly risky, and it is. But other thing that is true is that you will land someplace. It's not that you leave the United States and land in a desolate place of anarchy. You land someplace where there's a system, and you are going to survive. It's going to be uncertain, and you're not going to know what's going to happen the next day, but the beauty is that everything is new. Everything is fresh. People around you are doing things you've never seen, you don't understand. Little things, little nuances in how you buy groceries or get your water or take out the trash. They're all different, and that's invigorating. It can really wake you up. You have a great standard of living at a very reasonable cost. You don't have to make $5,000 a month to survive here. Being out here and being my own boss, going where I want to go, taking the Rover as far as we can take it, meeting people that we would never meet, living ways that we would never have imagined. That's all part of it. That's what we're here for, and we're getting so much of it.
All right. So as you can see, basically this is like stuff that we talk a lot about, and I thought it was something that was original with you guys was that you guys travel, as a couple. A lot of the people that we have, most of them are single guys. There are some girls that do it, and but I don't know. I think a lot of people maybe they don't think that it's that you'll be able to do it as a couple. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about that. I noticed that you said that you thought it was a very positive experience. So
absolutely,
yeah. So it's better than traveling by yourself. So what are the kind of some of the things that you think is better about traveling with as a couple?
Well, it's definitely a test of a relationship. It's definitely a test of how well you get along, and it's a test of your interest. Do you like to travel in the same way? Mm-hmm. Certainly, the way that Sean and I travel is hard. It's no frills, and it takes a certain kind of person to enjoy that. I think we both really love it. I also think we do well when stuff is really tough. So, you have issues at a border or you get sick or anything like that. We're really good at coming together in those moments. And
yeah, and that's the thing too. People should definitely go back and take a look at this video. What's one of the things that was in it when you're talking about how you guys have the Land Rover with nothing in it. So you don't have a radio?
No radio.
You don't have a radio, just have like not even a digital clock on it. So that's pretty cool. But because you want to be like rugged, you want to take it off kind of some maybe off-road type areas or
definitely. And the Land Rover is now 20 years old, so we have gradually removed things. In the case of the radio, I probably have some
stolen anyway.
I probably have some high school students to thank for the removal of that, actually. But other things.
Oh, so
sure.
Hold on, it was stolen, but you just left it.
The radio, exactly.
Okay.
And it's just we wanted to remove weight. We wanted to remove things that could potentially break. Uh-huh. The vehicle has over the years been simplified, and we don't have the back seat because we use that for storage. It's more practical this way for the kind of things we do. We do travel off-road, but really we travel long distances to remote parts where we just don't want to break down.
Yeah. So what are some examples of some places? I mean, you guys travel to a lot of different places, I'm sure, and I read in your we'll start out with this. What are some places you've traveled together that, with the Land Rover specifically, that would maybe surprise some people?
I think probably Guatemala, is the...
Guatemala was pretty amazing. We were there for a month, and we did not do the tourist trail. I mean, we started on the western coast at a little beach town that there was literally no other tourist on the entire island except Sean and I and another friend we'd brought with us for part of the ride. And then we cut all the way across the country, and we missed a lot of the tourist spots, but we dug into some definitely questionable areas, interesting areas, and a lot of off-roading, but off-roading in a tread lightly sort of way. I mean, we're going on paths that already exist. We're not off-roading in the sense of rutting up, virgin ground.
So hold on, but when you're doing this, I mean,
we're mainly like hitting communities of unknown communities that aren't tourist communities.
So when you do, what do? You like camp there or? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Often.
So you have a tent and you just. Oh.
Yeah. We have all that stuff. If we can't camp in some places, we find inexpensive hostels. There are options, but
sometimes homestays as well.
We travel on
our whole
a pretty
trip in Cuba.
tight
We stayed
budget.
in people's homes.
Yeah. So I think most people listening to this would be like, "What in the world? That sounds dangerous," or how could you do this? Especially Mittie's a good-looking woman here. Guys would be very kind of worried about that. Is that ever an issue that you guys think about?
Security is on our minds, sure, but we're pretty cautious within what we're doing in the sense that we're prudent when we cross borders. We don't travel lonely stretches at night. In fact, we're usually off the road pretty early, because in Mexico in particular, that's anytime after 4 p.m. is when it gets more questionable, let's say.
Yeah, definitely.
So we get off early and we take care of it, and I think the couple question comes into play here. We do take care of each other on the road, and we've had to do so in several places. And we had a really long train trip in Cuba in which one of us had to stay awake, say, to guard the bags, and that was much easier with two people.
36 hours.
Guys, where do you come from? Where are you from?
We're both from Louisiana, although we met here in San Miguel.
You did? And you've been here how long?
7 years?
Yeah, 7 years.
All right, and you met here?
Yeah.
And you're both from?
From Louisiana.
Louisiana, and
yeah,
you both
Sean's
happen
from
to be
New
here.
Orleans. I'm from Baton Rouge.
No.
Okay. And
There's a number of people from New Orleans down here. That's
true.
A lot of Southerners.
So what do you think about that, Jonathan? That doesn't seem like something that you'd be into, going kind of an off-road type thing with Cecilia. Would you be up for that?
No. Very fucking simple. No, I mean,
I think
for me,
both people have to want that kind of travel.
I love traveling. I love to go explore new places. I want to stay in reasonably decent hotels or rooms of some sort now.
Sure.
But sounds exciting.
Yeah.
And I respect it.
And after a certain amount of nights roughing it, we do often want an actual hotel room with a real shower.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is something.
But it must be some really crazy experiences. This is a good time for me to mention. There was a few questions about this specifically that people had on the Facebook group. Border crossing problems. Do you ever have that? What's some of those experiences with border crossing?
We've had a lot of border crossing experiences.
We have. I think going back to Guatemala, we had an interesting exit from Mexico, entry into Guatemala. Not all of our papers were up to date, and they let us through, but it was.
Oh, come on. You got to get more details on that. So, we're just going to go ahead and call ourselves out with our illegal activities.
Right.
We were on our way out of Mexico, and our papers were expired for, I believe it's the registration, right?
Okay.
And the guy says, okay, well, we'll let you out of Mexico, but they're not going to let you into Guatemala. So we leave Mexico. We are in the no man's land between the two. We are photographing the expired registration, photoshopping it on Sean's computer, and trying to find a place where we can print this falsified document to try to enter into Guatemala.
Yeah.
At that point, some sort of monsoon rain hits, and it is pouring.
Yeah.
And we managed somehow to do it. It was funny. At the moment, the woman in customs in Guatemala is checking this. she looks at Sean and she says, well, but this is a copy of the registration. He goes, yeah, I know. I didn't want to travel with the original.
Right.
I just figured that would be a little too dangerous. And she goes, okay. Well, enjoy your trip in Guatemala.
Where'd you print it?
At a little, it was a little store that had a printer, and I guess
no
they
man's
did.
land.
I know, that's
they
what I was
sold
thinking,
like
like-
pencils and erasers, and they happened to have a printer, and there we were, printing
cool.
our falsified documents.
Yeah.
It was stressful because they had the people that are document helpers knocking on your window, hustlers, sure.
Okay.
You're in 100
And there's no
meter
windows.
stretch.
No windows on the Rover, so they're literally in
There's a
your,
hotel,
in your
there's a photocopy place, there's just a few things like that, and you've got people pounding on the window asking if they can help you, like, oh, you're going to be in trouble if you don't let me help you because you don't have everything you need. There I am, of course, photographing this document
and luckily we know not
photoshopping
to
it.
listen to them either.
And it's pouring with rain. It was stressful.
They got a whole industry of just falsifying documents.
They really do, actually. They have got
that's funny.
serious
Okay.
clusters of hustlers when you try to cross a border.
Well, that's cool. So some other things that people asked about were money. So when you're traveling with money, how do you usually, cash and stuff like that? How do you, what do you do with that?
Usually we do have some cash on us, and we have a debit card connected to whatever we might have in a bank account. In the case of Cuba, cash only. And
Guatemala was pretty much cash only as well.
that's true because it was hard to reach.
Yeah,
bank
I mean, when you're really
locations.
going to be off the beaten path, nothing beats cash.
Right.
And it's just a situation of properly hiding it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm a big cash supporter myself, especially when traveling and stuff
So
like that.
where did you hide it?
In different places within our main backpack, but then also some on my person, and distributed. So if they find, if you get robbed and someone finds one particular pocket, you're not totally SOL.
Right. Well, I mean, that's cool. And I think there's so many things that we can talk about with this type of stuff. But I guess I should have introduced you guys more formally here. But Sean, you're a freelance photographer, right? So you originally were working in DC, and you decided that wasn't for you, and you kind of went on your own, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Came down to Mexico and started my freelance photography business. I am still primarily a documentary photographer. That's my passion. But of course, I do all kinds of commercial work to pay for my passion.
Yeah. That's great. And Mittie, how long? And you've been here for 7 years, Sean.
Yes.
And then how long have you been down here? 7 years as well? Or?
I'll be 8 years in August.
Okay. So I noticed you do, a variety of different things. So what
don't I do?
Yeah, right. So I don't know, how would you boil down kind of the way to
So when people
make
ask,
a
I
living?
usually say I'm a writer. I'm a writer by education. I have my master's in creative writing. So I do a lot of writing, content writing as well for, commercial stuff. I write a lot of travel articles. I have a travel blog. It's called Girl Wander. And Sean does all the photography for our blog. And that's pretty much where we, explain our travels and what we're doing, what we have going on. I also do web design. I have a web design business, digital marketing, editing, translation, which kind of comes with the writing part. And then on the side of that, I'm a performer.
Right. Yes.
little bit of everything.
Mittie's also a
I'm Girl
great
Friday.
Belly dancer. That was really the first time
That's
I saw
when we
you.
first met, yeah. When I was belly dancing at Carrie's art opening.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting things going on at San Miguel. But you had like a class, right? You were teaching.
Yeah, I teach at Libellula Studio, the Dragonfly Studio. It's in San Antonio. And it's a lot of fun.
So that's cool. I mean, man, but there's definitely you had a full-time job, right? Did you have a full-time job that you quit?
Yeah, ever since I was 16.
So there was a point in time, right, where you had to just quit and decide to go on this kind of this journey, right? I mean, I'm sure each of you have your own experience with that, but I mean, how was that? It must have been really nerve-wracking.
Nerve-wracking, sure, but I think also cathartic, and that's probably the case for most people that take a leap like that. I was working in Washington, D.C. in the area of foreign policy, enjoying it, but maybe not completely fulfilled, and decided to take a break. My coming to Mexico was going to be only for 2 or 3 months until I relocated. I was interested in immigration policy, and I was going to locate by the border.
Well, help us out here. What sort of job actually was it? You worked in foreign policy, so what did you do?
Let's see. I did research for the Inter-American Development Bank, for example, for the foreign policy department of Brookings. I worked for the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. Basically, organizations interested in U.S. Latin American relations.
Gotcha. And why was that unfulfilling to you? You just found it didn't...
Well, it was the right line of work for me, except I was feeling far removed from what interested me, which were the cultures and new experiences that Latin America has. And I wanted to come down here. I wanted to be, at the time I was really interested in immigration policy, still am. I was going to go to Texas or California and be on the border, document, write, photograph. I was looking at a couple of, I guess they're think tanks, but they're academic organizations that focus on these things, and they're down in Texas and California. But when I came to Mexico, I realized that I wanted to see if I could live off of the photography and travel, sometimes in Land Rover, sometimes not, and just make that my life.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, but it's worked out for you. But how long would you say it took you before you were, had a self-sustainable kind of income off that?
I think it took about 3 years, and even then it was shaky.
Right. So you had some savings.
Definitely, I had some savings. I had my camera. I had my computer.
Yeah.
I had the Land Rover.
Some capital.
The tools that I needed to create the content that would interest people. And of course, earlier I worked for less money and built up my portfolio. But as you know, San Miguel is a small town, even though it's growing. And it's word of mouth, and it's people seeing your content, what you can produce in the commercial arena.
Yeah.
They're also interested, of course, people in San Miguel are interested in the travel and the documentary, but in terms of making money in photography, it's about what you can produce for them at first. And now, of course, we're selling the Rover content and a few other things.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. But so as far as, but you weren't a photographer ahead of time. You just you said, well, I'm going to go down there, and you knew something about photography. And you said, I'm going to go down there and try to make a living doing this. Or did you already have a plan, or you just said, oh, screw it, I'm just going to do this?
Not a plan in that sense, no.
Yeah.
Not that structured of a plan. An idea,
right,
and kind of an openness to follow avenues that became available. So I came down and I just would see what I could make work.
Yeah. Okay, and then, I mean, but you did like free stuff for people for a while, so that they would know, volunteer maybe, or so people know your portfolio, or?
Yeah, mostly friends' weddings, sure, no cost, that kind of thing, but also restaurants, we could work out a deal, all that kind of stuff, sure, just to get better. I mean, you have to hone that skill. I'd always been a photographer as an amateur. It just is tied in with the travel, which I've done my whole life as well. But, making money as a photographer is a whole different beast. So I had to build the whole business side, which is, it takes time.
Yeah. Photography is something I like. I do it around town, and a lot of people like maybe I've been doing photography for like 2 years. A lot of people like it, but...
So you're competing with him then, James, is what you're saying?
No, Sean's been doing it longer than me.
Trying to put him out of business?
He's got...
Actually, I recommended James once.
Oh, did you?
Okay.
I don't know if they ever called you, yeah.
I don't know.
I was out of town.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
That's the only reason.
Yeah. I mean, when people ask me, like, oh, you're a photographer, I say, oh, well, I mean, I have gotten paid, so I guess you could say a professional photographer once you get paid to do it, right? But... normally I just, because I don't really consider it a business. It's just kind of a fun thing to do. And I like to do it, but it's something that it's like, it's not a location dependent thing. This is something that, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you can do it anywhere. Just gotta make the right contacts, find the people that need that work done. And
so you think it is something you can just pick up and take?
I think so. I think once your online portfolio is strong enough, which Sean's definitely is, we travel and we look for businesses that might be interested, or people that might be having weddings abroad in certain areas that we could contact. So
I see that,
it's
but
something that we're testing right now.
I think I get what James is saying. There's a little bit of a ramp up to the point where you reach a position in a particular community or market where people are calling you, Exactly. So I get what he's saying about that.
So I'm interested in how you go about pricing. Like, is that you just look at the industry, or you figure out what can I charge this person? You just pull the number out, or how do you figure that out?
I often base it on what my time is worth to me and how much time I'm going to put into it. Yeah, I don't really think it changes too much depending on what people can afford. There's a certain amount that I would like for a project, and if somebody is a friend of mine that can't pay for it or something and wants to do another barter, then occasionally we'll drop the price down, but ordinarily it's just a fixed price, usually depending on the hours that I would work or invest in the project.
Okay. Cool. And then, Mittie, you've got your blog, right? How long have you been doing that?
Almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I would say, while Sean jumped in the deep end in terms of making the transition from having a 9-to-5 to being, a digital nomad, so to speak, I definitely waded in via the shallow end. I had just finished my grad work, and I moved down here. I got a teaching position before I moved to facilitate the move. I had no savings whatsoever, and I came down here, having a job secured where they were going to do my paperwork and they were going to get everything ready for me. I worked as an elementary school teacher for 3 years and wrote. I would get up at 5 in the morning to write, and would write until I went to school at 7 and teach, essentially my 7 to 3 normal school day. And same
here
thing.
In San Miguel?
Yeah, here in San Miguel.
Oh, okay, so you're an English teacher?
Since my degree is in creative writing and English, that's what I have my master's in, so that's kind of like a gateway to be a teacher.
Yeah,
and
that's
I've always
cool.
enjoyed teaching, like I teach dance as well, so for me teaching has always been something I dug. But for me, that was a really great intermediate step. So for people that want to make that leap from having a normal 9-to-5 to moving abroad, I feel like teaching English is a really accessible thing. I mean, you can do it on a small scale, or you can be a full-time teacher, and either way you're going to have secured pay while you figure out if your digital nomad life, whether it's web design or whether it's writing or photography or whatever it is, can work for you in those independent places. So for me, it was a transition. Yeah. Whereas his was like he had saved up a little bit and then he had his tools and was like, okay, I can take this and wait long enough till my business gains the momentum that it needs.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in Spain that I knew that were friends of mine that were teaching English. That was pretty much all the people I hung out with. Everybody's an English teacher.
It's a great stepping stone.
Yeah. Here, I haven't seen it that much. I think Mexico City, a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
I originally was just going to volunteer here to teach English, when I first got here. And they didn't even need volunteers. So, I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of
it depends
people
on
that are
where.
willing to teach English here in San Miguel.
I was teaching at the Naciones Unidas, which is a United Nations school, and it's, I would say, probably the best private school in San Miguel. It's a really good school. And so for me, it was like a serious application process. They're only allowed to have a certain number of foreigners working for them, right? And that has to do with their taxes. Like based on a certain amount of taxes they pay, they can hire a certain number of foreigners. But it's really limited, so they're pretty tough in terms of their selection process. But there are other schools that, like you said, have volunteers and need volunteers.
Yeah. I just what I saw in Spain, at least, and I've seen in other places around the world, a lot of people that teach English, but just to do teaching English, from if you're employed by one of these companies that'll just give you jobs, you're not going to earn a whole lot of money. Now we were talking to the guy. Let's see. It seems like down in Taiwan, how much were they charging again, Jonathan? He said you were able to start teaching English.
I don't remember. You're talking about Greg?
Yeah. I think he said around $20 an hour was the starting.
Oh, I think he did say that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Southeast Asia is famous for actually paying pretty well.
Yeah.
And South Korea is another example of that.
Yeah.
I have several friends that teach over there, and wow, they make good money because they don't pay for their housing. No, in this case, it's really more of a transitional piece. Like, for me, I couldn't have done that full-time all the time because, no, it didn't pay well. I mean, it paid me approximately $1,000 US a month.
Okay,
which isn't terrible either, but isn't really.
It's enough to live here in San Miguel for sure.
To very comfortably live here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I did. I was comfortably living. I was able to save, but really at the same time, I was working on how to create my own business, in that momentum. So it's kind of, at least for me, it was a transitional stepping stone.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of folks that want to break out of their 9-to-5 but are afraid of just jumping straight into the unknown, it's a cool transitional spot where you'll still have income coming in, maybe not as much as you were used to at the job you had before, but you're able to then plan your business structure, figure out what it is that you want to do and how you think you could maintain it, kind of test drive it, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that it's a cool way, especially if you're with one of these companies, you can make up to $20 in Southeast Asia. I have known people that then go on to maybe like private tutoring, where you can make a little bit more.
Yeah.
But then other than that,
I also did the private tutoring thing.
You did that, Other than that, you're looking into like I don't know, having an English teaching school or something. If you want to make any,
Yeah,
a good amount of money,
there.
that's
Right.
that's all you can do because you're just selling your labor.
Exactly.
But it's an interesting thing to do. So I'm going to jump over to the Land Rover community. I don't even know what that is. I mean, you talked about that in the video, and you mentioned it earlier. I didn't know there was a Land Rover community. What's that all about?
There is. Land Rover has a very large global community spread out over many countries. I'm not even sure how many, but many countries have Land Rovers, including Mexico and Central America, United States, England, of course. That's where a lot of the fans are. But it's a tightly knit community. For us, it's a bit of a niche market in the sense that they are very tuned in to, say, our Land Rover adventures or anything Land Rover specific. They can really get into it. So...
And they're more enthusiasts of the older series vehicles, the Defender, not so much these newer models that are coming out that are a little bit more, we jokingly call them the soccer mom vehicles.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's amazing all like the different communities, I mean, that's basically what we're seeing with the internet is all these different, these people that are able to connect with each other on who knows what, commonality all over the world. So, I mean, I just thought that was fun. I never heard of that. Like, oh, I drive a Land Rover. Boom, you got this community of people that love Land Rovers.
Absolutely. No, and they're great for technical know-how. If we have a problem, we can tap into their knowledge and, get by.
Cool.
So it's wonderful to have them. And that, for example, being a niche market is something that will pay better than, say, publications in general, I understand, don't pay all that much. But if you're honing in on a niche market, there could be more money to be had.
Okay. So are you like trying? Are you working in the Land Rover community, or? Oh, okay.
Absolutely. We produce
publish articles with them.
Cool.
Adventure travel articles.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We have. Let's see. We have. Well, the biggest one that just came out was the Guatemala, 2,600 miles through Guatemala, which was an odyssey.
It was a whammy of an article.
It was awesome. It was an amazing trip. We had everything in there.
Okay, cool. What's the name of it? 2,600 miles?
No, I think they called it Mundo Maya 14.
Mundo Maya 14. Okay, I'll put it in the show notes.
It's in Rover's magazine.
In which one?
Rover's magazine.
Rover's magazine. Okay.
It's the largest Land Rover magazine in North America.
All right.
That's right. And we have another adventure coming out having to do with Real de Catorce.
By the way, speaking of Real de Catorce, I said I didn't want any mezcal, but if you guys are going to be sucking it down like there's no tomorrow, I'm
It
going to
is
have
so
some.
good.
Who, us? We don't know what you're talking about. We're not drinking mezcal.
Proceed.
We're professionals.
Yeah, we'll try to scam the Guatemalan government.
Who, us? We never did that.
So,
On the way in or on the way out?
So we are enjoying some mezcal from Real de Catorce as we're recording this. So that's what we're talking about here. So
Yum.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very good.
We sent that Rover article to the United Kingdom, so that's going to come out there pretty soon.
Yeah, that'll be coming out in next month's edition, hopefully.
Cool. So this is another option for people. I've known a number of other people that do this as well. Writing articles and getting them published in places and stuff like that, and you can make money doing this. So how would you, if somebody wanted to do that, not necessarily in the Land Rover community, but in any type of, publication, how would you think that they need to start doing that?
I would say that initially it's building a name for yourself and showing what kind of work you can produce. So, initially, if you put in a few articles for free, initially, if you're, for example, committing time and energy to a blog that really shows off what you can give to that publisher, then when you submit your material, you're more likely for them to take note of it. There's quite a bit of submissions being sent in all the time to any magazine that you can think of. So there's a lot of competition out there, and you need to be able to prove that your material is even worth reading. Otherwise, they're not going to read it. It'll go right in the slush pile.
Yeah.
Consistently worth reading.
Consistently worth reading. And I think also the networking. You need to, communicate with the communities that you feel like are your niche, that you want to submit to, so that they know what your name is, they know who you are, and they have some sense of what's going on. So we've been posting. We have several Land Rover forums we interact with, lots of different social media related to Land Rovers, and that's the way that we connected with some of the contacts that we have. Actually, both the contact with Rovers North and the contact with Land Rover Magazine were through... No, that's not true?
Land Rover Monthly, I think.
Land Rover Monthly, excuse me.
But they both knew of us from our Land Rover content through social media before we had contacted them. So we'd already been putting it out quite a bit.
And you putting out consistent blog posts and stuff and not getting paid.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, for a while.
Not always, yeah.
Yeah, and networking allowed you to do that. So with this latest one that's been published in a magazine, how many hours would you say you spent on writing the whole thing?
Well, there are the hours of the adventure, too.
Right,
you know?
yeah, experience. So you went all the way through Guatemala, and then when you were done, you took pictures, and that's another thing you add to the things as well as the pictures.
Editing process as well.
Editing and all this.
Sure.
If you had to estimate.
We can't base for the adventure travel stuff. I don't think we can think about it as an hourly thing because it's really what we want to be doing. So we put a month. And we put so much energy beforehand and our own
photos. Then it's sorting the photos, and it's editing the photos, getting it down to your final 100 batch out of 1,000.
Yeah, and I think it cost us $3,000 to make that trip, and certainly we'll never recover anything like that on that trip. So we're not actually making money, let's say, but we are recouping some of the costs. But in terms of the hours, I don't know how many. I mean, because it's a labor of love. I edit those things. I still go back and edit the Guatemala stuff. Why? Because it's just I can keep finding stuff that I love.
And also, I mean, I think it's like it's a stepladder process. You have different levels, right? And so you're at one level of the business. Right now, we're at a level of the business where people are finding out who we are, and people in this particular niche are becoming aware of us, which is giving us more leverage. And so we're getting more money for our articles. We're getting more awareness. We're getting more just opportunities than we were before. But we're kind of at that point. We're about to take the next step up, right? And it's a process, I think, climbing that ladder.
And I've noticed most people that look to get their things published aren't necessarily looking at, they aren't looking at money specifically off of the article, but they're looking for traffic to their own websites or whatever. They have their own kind of monetization.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider the traffic that comes in, if you consider just the visibility, who you're going to be reaching, what different audiences you may be reaching that are within the same niche market. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of work worth it. That may not necessarily pay as much as you want.
Well, that's cool. I mean, all kinds of different ways to kind of
to understand
fund yourself.
Productivity.
I'm just looking. I'm looking at your blog, Mittie, called Girl Wander.
Yes.
And you've got a travel workbook.
Yes.
What is that?
It just came out. It's actually a journal. It's an interactive journal, and I'm calling it a journal and workbook so people understand that it is interactive. And so what it is it's a series of 30 prompts that are for engaging the world on a deeper level, whether you're actually traveling or whether it's just in your regular everyday life and you want to have a deeper experience of your reality. So it's travel inspired, it's digital nomadism inspired, and it's fun. I've always been a big fan of journals, interactive journals, and there are several people in the journaling community that I admire quite a bit. Sarah Ward Harrison is one of them. Sabrina Ward Harrison is one of them. And Sark is another really big one. And I feel like interactive journals are just, as a writer, are really cool because they're giving you these prompts that you're engaging with and you're able to look at, on a deeper level than you might have already just come up with for your own personal journaling.
And how does that work? Is it online? Is it a website? They get a username and password?
Yeah. No, it's actually it's downloadable. It's like an ebook.
Gotcha.
It's print quality. So if someone wanted to print it out and have that, tactile journal experience of actually writing in the book as well. So
So where do people need to go to get access to that?
It's on my website.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
And
girlwanderer.com.
Yeah, no, it's MittieRoger.com.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
Mittie Roger.
Yeah, MittieRoger.com.
It looks like Roger. Don't put a T on the end.
Spelled like Roger. And don't put an S on it, please.
I love to put an S on it.
Don't put an S on it. Yeah, every day he asks me, but did you spell it correctly? I mean, with an S on it? Stop it. It's not funny.
Well, that's cool. So do you have any other things like that on your website?
I do have another book.
Okay.
It's a book of short stories. It's called Aurora. And it came out last year. Yeah, it came out 2013. It came out actually. But yeah, it's a group of short stories. It's a very short book, and it was published by Monkey Puzzle Press.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, Mittie, you've gone to all different types of places. Can you tell the people, some of the more exotic places that you've traveled?
Yeah, I would say my most exotic trip was Ghana. Mm-hmm. West Africa was just a mind fuck. Can you say the word fuck on your show?
Podcast lane.
I did earlier. You just didn't hear it.
No, it was unbelievable. I mean, you talk about really changing your perspectives. I was 19 at the time, and I was coming from the South. I was coming from, a relatively high society community, and to go somewhere and see the way that people live, it's just such an eye-opener. It really makes you appreciate what you have. It really makes you respect ingenuity and respect how people can make things out of just practically nothing. It totally revolutionized my life. Wow. I would also say Romania was a really big one for me. I was doing some volunteer work there in an orphanage, as well as like some building projects that they were doing out there. And again, these people that are just so innovative and just the creativity with music and dance and having a passion for dance. West Africa was huge for me as well. I mean, there's nothing like those Ashanti dancers. They're unbelievable. Mm-hmm. They're acrobats, But yeah, so those are some of the big ones. Peru, I hiked the Inca Trail 4 days to Machu Picchu, 12 hours a day. Carried my own pack. I was one of 2 of all the tourists I saw on the entire thing carrying their own pack. I was pretty proud of that.
So with this type of stuff, was that before you came here?
Yeah, that was all pre-San Miguel.
Okay, and how did that go about? You just had a period of time where you're just going all over the place?
No, I mean, I was in school and I was working and I would just save up and then I would, Ghana, I was there for 3 months. I was volunteering. So I did actually go and live there for a little chunk of time. And I was volunteering. So, with the volunteer industry, it's weird because a lot of times they have people pay and it's not exactly cheap. Luckily, my parents were willing to help foot the bill. At the time I was really young, to go and volunteer over there. But the rest of my trips were just a situation of, okay, I want to do this. I'm going to save up for it. I'm going to take off this amount of time. I did quit a handful of jobs to go on big trips and come back, find a new job,
Yeah. That's what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah.
That was my MO too. I would save up and work for a while, and then I would use the transition between jobs to take an extended travel.
Okay. And so you had some trips like this as well. What are some of the ones, the more exotic places that you decided to go on these types of excursions, maybe?
More exotic kind of places. Well, I've been to Cuba several times. Definitely one of the more exotic places I've been. I've also been I loved India. Mm-hmm. I traveled once for 2 weeks from Indonesia up through Thailand, India, into Nepal, and that was about as foreign as I can imagine. It was beautiful.
I've heard it described like that, and I've heard that the complete opposite of Western culture is like North Korea, but that India is probably the most that you're going to go and visit. Is like the most contrary to what we're used to. Is India. Yeah.
I did that trip right before I studied abroad, and studying abroad I was in college and it threw my academic schedule out of whack, and that's when I had I had the time to go do that. And it was, I think India particularly was an education in itself. Calcutta is mind-blowing. Calcutta will change the way you see humanity, really. I remember looking out of a car window in traffic and seeing a beautiful older woman dressed in purple with a parasol, and she was in a cart. And as I looked forward, the cart was being pulled by a barefoot man in traffic. It was surreal. Several examples like that all through India. And beautiful people, food, culture, very vibrant.
I don't know anything about that area, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. We're looking at the
You guys are both involved in something it looks like you're calling the Migrant Project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about what that is. I'm seeing pictures of migrants.
We've been working on this project for, I would say, about a year and a half. Almost 2 years? And, it started with us just seeing these migrants begging in San Miguel. And initially we assumed they were Mexican folks. And then upon inquiring, learned that they were Central American migrants making the trip to the United States to enter illegally and work there. And so that really piqued our curiosity, and we wondered, how can we engage with this humanitarian crisis? Because they're getting abused and robbed by the police, they're getting abused and robbed by the gangs, and really they just want to go work for a season and bring that money back, you know? So it was really interesting for us, especially Sean having worked in foreign policy. I think, you know, he just really found this project very interesting as well. And so, yeah, we've begun interviewing them. And essentially what we do is we ask them, what would you want the world to know? Or what's your story? Or, you know, what do you want to share with us? And then we take some quotes from them.
You know, are those where I see, I can't remember the name of the road. What, you're headed sort of toward the Libramiento?
Yes.
Yeah, and you see,
the crosswalks,
so
and the
that's
speed
what that
bumps,
is,
and that's
because
what they
I'm
are.
like-
They often have backpacks.
Yeah. Yeah, they're always there, and they do have a different vibe than I'm used to seeing in the city.
Exactly,
You know?
and a slightly different accent.
Right.
And
They're in the middle of an epic journey, you know, in which they're constantly being robbed, beaten. It's traumatic, and they're voiceless, which means they're also, they have no rights. And
so what Sean means by that is, like, since they're anonymous, since they're trying to do something that is illegal and they don't want to be known, then at the same time, they don't have a voice. They can't express, you know, the most common thing we hear is the police, specifically in San Miguel, attacking, abusing, robbing them. We met one guy who had his ribs broken for $20. They kicked him in the ribs. His ribs were broken. This poor guy, it was like, he was in tears. He was so shattered, and he was like, I just want to go home. You know, they broke my ribs for $20. And it's like, but if you're illegal and you can't talk about that, then, I mean, you know.
There was a big deal in the news. I can't forget. I forget what it was. Maybe within the last year, there was a big thing about, I think it was the Guatemalan immigrants that were coming up to the United States. Some news story that blew up. I can't remember.
on the U.S. border, you mean?
Yes.
Right.
I can't.
I think they were the children. They had
there's all these children that were showing up, right? Yeah.
Unguided minors essentially making it to the border. And that was the beginning of a crackdown and a media campaign in Central America. They were discouraging people from going north. They had radio and other media saying that it was harder.
And we saw billboards, too, in Guatemala
That's
that were
true.
saying, don't let your kids go. They're not going to make it. The cops are going to get them. And
Much harder now. And in Mexico, they received some pressure from the United States, and we had what was called like the crackdown of 2014, I think they were calling it, in which they were checking the trains. They sped the trains up. They were checking them more. They were checking the buses. They were making it much harder to traverse Mexico. And in fact, some of the Central Americans were staying in southern Mexico. And I think they might have had hopes for asylum, but Mexico wasn't really granting asylum. So it was a tough situation. But for a while there, we stopped seeing Central American migrants come through San Miguel.
Yeah.
And that has since changed. You know,
we had some areas that we regularly checked to see if they're there, and we went, and there was no one there for quite a period of time.
I think, what you say about the cops is pretty disturbing. And, last thing, I've been in San Miguel a little over a year, and it's like, it is very possible to have rose-colored glasses. It seems to me that the local police here in San Miguel they don't even make eye contact with me.
Not with the foreigners.
Yeah, they're like, leave them alone. Don't just, and yet that's not the case across the board, and I'm sorry to hear about that.
Well, one of the things I think is that they're not very well paid. And so it's kind of expected that they
beat up the
bribes.
Guatemalans?
Well, no, just that they get bribes out of local folks.
Right.
And then that just kind of extends to these migrants, because the migrants are just as helpless as can be. I mean, like we said, they have no voice. So, they just know they can rob whatever they have, and they're going to be okay. But we saw something really interesting. We crossed over land coming back from the United States in May, and we crossed over land. We actually walked across the border in Laredo, which was interesting. And then we took a bus from Nuevo Laredo to San Miguel de Allende, and it was really interesting because we're sitting in there and nobody thinks that we speak Spanish. We both speak fluent Spanish, and there's a group of guys behind us talking about how they were trying to cross illegally and how the cops busted them, and they were giving their whole spiel about the desert and how they'd run out of money, how they'd run out of food, and how they had to cross, and how the cops caught them, and we overheard their entire thing, and we're sitting there going like, oh, this is such good fodder for the Migrant Project. But of course, we had been eavesdropping. So
There are Vice. I think I've seen 1 or 2 Vice videos on this whole deal, right?
We love Vice.
Yes, we love Vice. I can't think of the one you're talking about, but I'm sure if they have, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've seen at least 1 or 2. I'll see if I can find them. I'll put them in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like kind of a deal a lot of people have been talking about. I don't know if people have noticed it, but yeah.
Good.
People, they have to get out of their they for whatever reason they need to get. I mean, what are the reasons that people have to leave Guatemala? It's such economics.
They're fleeing violence. They're fleeing gang violence. They're fleeing poverty. They are often leaving a situation. These are agricultural workers or construction workers, and they are leaving a situation in which they have families, but are making the equivalent of, say, 50 Mexican pesos a day, working all day,
which is like $3.
$3, and what you're having is they're just not making ends meet, so they have to send somebody north.
And then they have gangs where every time they go to pick up their paycheck, the gangs are waiting outside the bank and rob them.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah, the violence in some of those areas is really bad.
Yeah.
So they're fleeing a very bad situation, and that's really the only thing that would make a journey like the one they're undertaking understandable. It's a very difficult journey.
So extreme.
They're exposed to all kinds of violence on the route, gang violence, and law enforcement, coyotes when they get that far.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys that we were listening to at the border had been asked to carry backpacks with marijuana in them. They were mules.
Sure.
Because these coyotes are taking them. So, all right, you take the pack and we start walking. And
if they get busted, I mean, to hell with them, right? I mean, yeah. But I wonder how much
we're the only way you're going to get across anyway, so take this or we'll kill you.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, because we know that they kill people and leave them in the desert,
Right.
Common.
So this Migrant Project, you guys, you interview some of these people that have taken this journey, and you basically document some of the stuff that they've gone through and publish it for the world.
Yeah, essentially it's a quote. I mean, our idea was these people are anonymous. So putting a face to these numbers, they're not just numbers, because you hear, for example, okay, there are this many people that are crossing the border, but it's just a number. You don't have any compassion or empathy for that number. But when you see a person's face and you hear a little glimpse of what they're experiencing, that's different.
Yeah.
And some of these are really beautiful stories, of humanity, of people finding each other on the route and being together and getting each other across. It's beautiful.
So, Sean, I'm looking at the web page there on your website, and I see pictures and some blurbs underneath them. Is there another website for this, or what plans do you have for this?
Well, it's evolving.
Okay.
But at the moment, most of the text comes out through Mittie's blog, through Girl Wander. There's a Migrant Project segment to it. This is really just the photo gallery where I've included some of the more poignant quotes.
I see.
If you look under About and Migrant Project.
Got it.
And then those are the blogs. Essentially, we have their quotes, which was kind of inspired by Humans of New York. We wanted an image of them, and we wanted a quote of whatever they wanted to tell us. And then on my blog, I go a little bit deeper into, whatever other conversation we had with them and any additional points that they made or that they wanted to share beyond the quote that we chose.
So that we can talk about the larger question.
Yeah. It seems like, I don't know, to me, maybe there'd be a way to approach it. It just seems like such a large problem. Even if you were to raise money, it's like, what?
Yeah.
How it's,
well, it's interesting because this particular project was picked up by Harvard's, what's Dr. Glass?
David Rockefeller Center for Latin America Studies. They showed some of these pieces in Mexico City to help us raise awareness and just...
Yeah, Sean had a photography show of his documentary work, and they did a whole wall of just Migrant Project. And, I think they were definitely interested as well in this material.
All right, well, cool. I'll put a link to that for sure. It's, it's an interesting thing. That's kind of you guys, labor of love right now, it seems, and hopefully that turns into something that can make a change. Originally I think we talked about traveling as a couple. Now, I mentioned that because we have a lot of... people that are single guys or whatever that are doing this. A lot of guys. Well, I mean, you started out when you were single, right? You hadn't met Mittie yet, right?
True. So, we both traveled single early in life.
We both did, yeah. And a lot of guys would love to find a girl that would be open to this type of lifestyle. It's very hard to find. I mean, would you think? Would you agree with that?
You're aware of that, Mittie?
Absolutely.
Because,
actually, yes.
yeah.
I mean, my whole friend crew are ladies just like me, so they understand. They like hard travel. They like that kind of thing. But no, it's definitely not the norm. I mean, a lady who wants to sleep in a tent and, doesn't care if she goes 4 days without a shower or whatever, I mean, that is not your average lady.
The story that we get a lot is, generally speaking, women love to travel maybe even more than men.
Yeah,
they love
definitely.
the idea. But when they don't really like the full-on digital nomad concept usually. So, yeah, every now and then we find somebody like you, but it doesn't happen that much. And that's why it's kind of frustrating for guys who are looking for someone who wants to share that lifestyle.
There are also some nuts and bolts logistics that you have to have the right kind of mindset for. Like Sean and I do really well with kind of the spontaneous flexibility of, oops, okay, this paper is expired and now we need to suddenly deal with it urgently at a border or whatever the case is, And I think we both do really well with that kind of stuff. But I think for a lot of people, that's extremely stressful and, borderline traumatic, probably.
Yeah. Resilience, it's something it's really hard to come by. And like Jonathan was saying, sorry, I think a lot of girls would say, "Oh, I'd love to go traveling and this and that." Yeah, they want you to take them on a vacation,
right?
But then they want to go back to their mom's house,
and then they like the pina colada and laying by the pool, right? Yeah. Well, and we've had some outrageous experiences. Another one of the ones that was really a big one, when we were in Guatemala, we ended up getting stuck behind a Monsanto protest that were all Mayan farmers in a very remote region. They had blocked the only international highway, and we were stuck there for 2 days without food or water. Yeah. And meanwhile, they're protesting Monsanto. They're angry about Monsanto. And here we are with his DC plates on the Land Rover, with our logos on the side of the Land Rover.
Right.
And I mean,
We're the only foreigners.
We were just moving. We were just a target. I mean, and there are those kinds of moments like that with really hard travel, especially when you're getting off the beaten path.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, deep breathing. Like you just have to believe everything's going to be okay.
And that's exactly
navigate
it.
your way through it.
Yeah, because there's times, and that's, I don't know. That's definitely a challenge I find as well. I mean, I don't find it hard to find girls to go out with or anything like that. But as far as like a long-term relationship, or somebody that you're gonna like share all your information with, you're gonna allow in your house, and you're gonna be living with and go and do all this stuff with, it's hard to find someone that's gonna be so resilient and be willing to put up with this type of stuff.
But they're out there. It's just a different type of personality and I think I would credit mine entirely on my trip to Ghana. I was absolutely prissy before I went to Ghana. I just had no idea, and I got there and everyone shits on the beach. Yeah. And you're like, well, I mean, what are you going to say? There's somebody next to you and that's what they're doing. You're just like, all right, well, have a nice afternoon.
How old were you when you went to Ghana?
I was 19.
19, okay. Mm-hmm. So maybe a characteristic you could look for is
traveling early.
Yeah,
I think
a woman who's traveled early.
Yeah, exposure to other cultures early in life so that you have a realization that, okay, this isn't the way the rest of the world lives. I mean, I don't think people understand that United States is, what percent? We're like 10% of the world, and we use like 90% of the resources or something. There was a figure I just posted on my blog recently, some stats that were just mind blowing. We don't realize how many resources we use in the United States as a quote unquote, daily life as a normal thing. And it's like, no, the rest of the world uses only a fraction of that. So when you're exposed to that in real life, it makes you question, why do I need all these products or all this? All these material riches. You don't. You can be just as happy without them.
Well, I definitely had a exposure to other cultures when I was younger. I used to spend my summers in Puerto Rico, and my dad's Puerto Rican. So, but what about you, Sean? Did you go to places when you were younger? Or?
Also, my family's traveled all my life, and I think one of the things that did for me was it taught me adaptability, and I think that's one of the things we're rocking now so well, which is. We can go to some place, encounter a difficulty, whether it's at a border or whether it's mechanical or whatever, and we can emotionally get through that. We can be together, we can be relaxed, we can discuss it, and we can figure our way out of it. And I think that is a huge asset. I feel I do much better in that situation with Mittie than I would without her. She's calming. I find her level-headed in those situations. And obviously that's key. You have to be level-headed. We both have to be level-headed and have a discussion so we can figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I just love how tough he gets. I get all supportive and like sweet, and he just gets totally courageous and then just does whatever needs to be done to get us through.
Yeah. So, Mittie, if you had to, make a suggestion maybe to guys, that are looking for someone like that, a girl that's resilient or willing to go, be a digital nomad or whatever. I don't know, like, what would you suggest that they look, or what? Would you give any like advice on that type of thing?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of it is kind of intuitive. When you meet people, you kind of have to ask yourself, what are the interests of this person, and are those interests in conflict with a more adventurous life?
Mm-hmm.
For example, is this someone who gets their hair and nails done every couple of weeks? Is this someone who?
Well, let me ask this a question. Where did you guys meet?
We met here. One of the things that we do for money is that I have a small house that we rent out, and that's why you've seen us living in different parts of town. We rent that house out, and the first person I rented it to was a good friend of Mittie's, and Mittie helped her.
I was schlepping.
Okay, hold on. I want to back up a second. So you have you own a house in San Miguel?
Own a house in San Miguel.
Okay. And you rent this house out on what, Airbnb or something?
No, usually by word of mouth, actually.
Word of mouth. Okay,
Yeah.
for long-term rentals?
And long-term rentals,
Long term.
Okay. And then you use that money to rent in another place?
Well, normally we use that money to travel, but then
Okay.
when we need to rent, we can just rent for whatever the interim is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say, less than half the price or something. We can rent
we can
outside
rent
of
a little hole in
town.
the wall and
Okay, cool. And so did you buy this house? Were you given this house? Or how did you come across this?
Well, I came down to Mexico with a little bit of money from my previous career in life, and invested it as soon as I got here in a lot. It had a structure on it, but had to be taken down. It was a very small lot, kind of a funky L shape, and hadn't been sold. It was kind of a bargain in a great part of town, and I fixed it up. It took everything I had. In fact, as I was putting the finishing touches on it, I was at that point pretty much working full time as a photographer, and I was using that money. It was the original structure went up pretty fast, but that part was slow in the sense that it took me a long time to finish it and get it rentable, because you have to have all the amenities in it to rent it, which was the idea. If I can rent this...
Oh, his house is so unique and cool, too.
Well, that's cool. Well, kind of more so how much would you say that you put in overall time and money to get it up and ready to rent?
Oh, time. Way too much.
Yeah.
Money. In that case, I probably spent $170,000 in the house.
And
yeah,
do you think that you've made that money back now, or how long will it take you to make that money back?
No, it's an investment.
You have passive income now for the rest of your life.
Well, in theory, I had a little bit of money, and what was happening in the States was that I was not making more savings. I wasn't able to put too much more away. If I wanted the kind of travel that I wanted, it would cost me. So these are deductions to the money that you have. So that wasn't really working for me. The house is what flipped that around for me. If I put it all into the house, I'm flat broke, but then I can have that earn money while I'm off doing other things. And that's the key, I think, in our economy, is that we have several sources of income, and we keep them all going so that we can get a little bit here and there to keep us going. When we do long trips, the Rover takes a lot of gasoline, and then food is the other big cost. We make a lot up on the living side because we don't go to hotels that much and things, but it's still an expensive proposition. So we have to make a little bit of money. We build up as much as we can, say shooting weddings and doing social media and all that kind of stuff. But the house helps too on longer trips.
Well, that's great. It sounds like that was a great investment for you to make right off the bat. Now, down here in Mexico, they don't really give loans, so you just bought it cash?
I had money from DC, and I had some money from my family.
Okay.
And as I say, it wasn't that much, but it was... In the States, it would have gone fast. It would have been hard to really do anything with $170,000, but... Here, I just squeaked by, but it worked. Now I have that, and if I travel, I can make some money on it. And of course, the principle is safe. If we sell 10 years from now in San Miguel, in Guatemala, we'd be in good shape. It would, make a little money probably.
Wow, that sounds like it was a great investment. So normally we like to ask people, like, number one best piece of advice. So, like, if there's somebody, I'll ask each of you guys individually, but we'll start with you, Sean. If somebody's thinking about doing this, say they're in the States, maybe they're working a job similar to the job that you used to have, and they're like, man, damn it, I just want to get out of here. Maybe I'll go to Mexico or Asia or whatever the hell. What would be the best piece of advice that you think you would give somebody in that situation, to do something like this?
I would say scale down your cost, your overhead, reduce your intake, live simply, save up some money, focus on what you can create, what you can provide. In this case, it was the photography. I had to make that viable for this to work. Otherwise, it would have just been an extended vacation. Ultimately, I would have had to go back. You need probably some tools of whatever trade you're going to be getting into so that you can prove yourself and...
Some skills.
Some skills, yeah. I would say so. And stay adaptable. You don't know what's going to become available. And the truth is, we don't have the ability to really fully see that when we're living in a place like where I was living in D.C., living and working, everybody's doing the same thing. You seem like you're on the right path. The path is soon to get a home, maybe a family, if that's your interest. And it's very hard to perceive what might come to you once you step out of that bubble. And there are all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah. So, maybe just try it out a little while, go to where you're thinking about going and
take the plunge, be flexible, be open. And just be ready for the unknown.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, Mittie, same question.
That was a good answer.
Yeah.
I would say I agree. I mean, certainly being a minimalist is huge. And if you can start being a minimalist in your life right now so that you can save as much as possible and bring that forward into your journey, I mean, that's key. But we also have to recognize that entrepreneurship is not natural to many people. It's not something you can learn. It's something you either have or you don't have. Not everyone is an entrepreneur, and not everyone is ready to be a digital nomad, So you need to figure out, what is your passion? What are you really into? What are you excited about? Because it's the only thing you can build a business around. And then if you want to build a business that you can move, what are kind of the physical constraints of that? What do you need to do to make it mobile? But yeah, definitely slimming down and consuming as little as possible in terms of resources so you can save and put that toward. There is always a lull as soon as you drop off and you're trying to build up a new business. And so also any baby steps you can take in the interim to help you bridge that gap. Yeah. Whether you start planning your business while you're still at your old job or what it is, but that you kind of initiate that idea and begin planning for it.
Yeah. So what do you think, Jonathan? A pretty cool couple of people here, huh?
Yeah, it was, I don't think we've ever met before, but like I said, you saw me at the restaurant. Cecilia and I were out at, Aguamiel, Cocina Rustica, I think it was. I have never heard of that place before. It was a great restaurant. You were taking shots of their food, was that right?
Everything, yeah, I was doing like the whole package for them. Jennifer and Gabi are doing a great job out there. They have a very unique menu.
Amazing.
Well,
What
I saw you.
Yeah.
I actually probably photographed some of your food before it left the kitchen. Okay. Yeah, they're doing a great job. It's cool. It's different. And I did behind the scenes and the plates and the ambiance. And
yeah. Well, no, it's great to meet you guys. This town, I mean, what's the population of San Miguel? Something like 100,000?
They say 140,000, but it could be larger. When we get visitors, it feels...
Oh, yeah.
And the expat population is something like 10% of that? Something like, so 10 to 15,000, something like that?
I think so.
Yeah, there's quite a few of us expats here.
So it's not, I mean, there are so many that you can recognize people, of course, as you go through town, but you can also not know anybody, and have been here a year, and I'm always in Centro and everything, so it's really nice to meet you. And I'm glad to hear your background, your story, and how you've made it work here for so long, and such interesting stuff. I just wanted to say this Migrant Project you're doing, it's very interesting. As it occurs to me that as I'm reading, I'm going, well, this reminds me of all the stories that you hear about the people coming across in rafts from Cuba.
Yeah.
You've got terrible situations here, and terrible things are befalling these people, and they're trying to escape violence, and a lot of times they die.
A lot of times they encounter worse violence than what they had in their hometown.
Yeah. So it's not something I'm used to. I don't think I've really heard anybody focus on this. I think there was a movie.
There have been a few.
Sin Nombre?
Yeah, and they focus sometimes on the Bestia, the train that travels north.
Well, they got into. Remember, I had to read the Spanish subtitles. I saw it a while back, and they were talking about pay attention to the Mexicans. They love to say the word "fuck." Do you remember this?
That's right.
Was that the movie? Oh, okay.
And that's how they distinguished whether or not they were Mexican or Central American. Right.
And they got into California.
Anyway,
but that was all about that subject. And anyway, it's pretty heartbreaking to read this, to hear what they're subjected to, because, as you say, they don't have a voice. So I appreciate you doing something like this. I never would have thought to do that.
I would just say that the reason the Central Americans were trying to pass as Mexicans is that they wouldn't have to be sent back as far and could just turn around and try again.
Right.
That was the reason. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Well, we've really enjoyed having you guys here. I think we're like halfway through that bottle of mezcal, so good conversation.
It's funny. About 5 minutes ago, Mittie came. I'm in the vocal booth right now, and she came in smiling, and I thought, she wants to see my vocal booth. So I showed her, and then she looked around and she looked disappointed. She was looking for the fucking bottle of mezcal. So she
Busted!
Yeah.
Right.
So, anyways, all right. Well, it's great to have you guys on, and I'm sure that we'll be hanging out around the city. And thanks everybody for listening to another Borderless podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast. Traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.